Hi, thank you all for being here. I'm Dylan Matthews. I'm a reporter at Vox, and I and you all are very lucky today to be talking to one of the world's leading experts on child poverty and deprivation and the consequences of it, Irv Garfinkel. Irv is the Mitchell Ginsburg Professor of Contemporary Urban Problems at Columbia, and I've been following his work and learning from it for decades, years and years before the current craze around universal basic income. Irv was doing really pioneering work on how cash can transform lives of people in poverty. And he's doing great work, again, during the pandemic right now. So Irv, I wanted to start by talking a bit about the pandemic and where things stand. You and your team at Columbia are doing a lot of work around tracking where poverty is going during this crisis. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, we've developed a model that looks at poverty on a monthly basis, and that was actually in response to the pandemic. And when Zach Perlin, who took the lead on this, first developed it, I thought it was a crazy idea, but it was actually a very good idea. And I believe there will be another session that will deal with that model in particular and what we found. But it's clear that the poverty rates, national poverty rates, spiked dramatically, and that the previous CARES Act, the Relief Act, made a huge difference and kept poverty from increasing. It would have increased dramatically. And because of the CARES Act, both the unemployment insurance provision and just the cash provisions made a big difference.
And so that was sort of a proof of concept for giving cash as a way to address this kind of vulnerability. And we're hearing a lot more proposals for doing that as a kind of permanent policy, a child allowance, which I know is an idea you studied a lot.
Yeah.
What do you know from social science work by you and others about sort of the long-term costs and benefits of a policy like that?
So the first thing to say, and this is kind of the first research we did, is it would have a dramatic impact on child poverty. So the American Family Act, that's almost all the Democrats support, would have a child allowance of $3,600 for children 0 to 5 and $3,000 for children who are 6 to 17. And by the way, I should add, Senator Romney's proposal would actually be slightly more generous for the first child. But it's financed largely by reducing other poverty programs. But if you look at the effects of the American Family Act that's embodied, I should say, in President Biden's American Relief Act for 1 year, that would reduce child poverty by 45%. A bigger reduction for Blacks and Hispanics than whites, so it narrow racial gaps. So that's the first thing to say, and that's an immediate effect. But back to your other question about long run effects, that's kind of amazing. We started a research project. It's a year ago, a little over a year ago, to look at the returns to investing in children if we were to have a child allowance of $3,000 for the most kids, $3,600 for the younger kids. And what we did was we reviewed the literature of what there's now. We found 20 studies, high quality studies that are mostly quasi-experimental studies. A bunch of them are based on food stamps and the earned income tax credit. And the effects that are documented on children are just remarkable. So, starting with birth. So, if the family was getting a benefit, uh, birth weight was higher, lower, smaller, low, a few, much smaller proportion of low birth weight children, less neonatal mortality, um, better health as a child. As they grow into adults, better health as an adult. They live longer, they get more education, they earn more, they pay more taxes, they're less likely to be involved in child protective services or the criminal justice system. 19 of 20 studies show positive effects uh, across the board. So, and then we had to put dollar values. That was the exercise, to put dollar values. I should point out, if I can just backpedal for a moment. So the National Academy of Science did a study, which you're familiar with, the roadmap to reducing child poverty. And as you know, they found that the costs of child poverty, the cost to the nation in reduced productivity, bad health, etc., was close to $1 trillion, 800 billion to a little over $1 trillion. So just I rounded to $1 trillion. and the cost of a child allowance that we've described is about 100 billion. But it only cuts poverty in half. It doesn't eliminate it. So the numbers are not quite the same. Our research shows what this picture shows, that for 100 billion, we generate 800 billion in benefits to the country as a whole every year. And that's a remarkable investment when you think about it. $8 for every dollar spent, and taxpayers recoup a little over half of that expenditure too. So, and I should add, we did sensitivity analyses, and any way you cut it, it turns out. So at the worst, a child allowance is a pretty good investment. At the best, it's an extraordinarily good investment. So that's what I would say. And hopefully the American Relief Act will pass, and we'll get child allowances for 1 year. That would be remarkable in and of itself. But if we get that, my guess is that we'll get the permanent program. It's possible we wouldn't. Things can happen, but it looks now like this is going to happen. I'm amazed.
No, it's an incredibly exciting time. 2020 and 2021 have surprised me, but this would be one of the happier surprises. I wanted to talk, we're talking about the long term. I want to talk a little bit about the short term.
Yeah.
You've been tracking what's happened during the pandemic. What would the last year have been like if we had a policy like this? What if the American Relief Plan had been put into effect, say, last February instead of now or next month?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think for starters, especially young children, families with young children, this has been amazing. It's just so hard on them. And first of all, it would have cushioned the economic blow And it would have done it from day one. It provides a child allowance, provides a floor of income. So we would have had that in place. It would have, the CARES Act was great, both unemployment insurance, and the payments to families, but it took a while to get out. And this would have been in place. That would have been remarkable. One of the things that Robinhood, when I was talking to people at Robinhood, and I think it was Sarah Altman's, who asked me, she said, well, is this unusual? Has this ever happened before with child poverty? And the answer is not in the United States. So there are two things I could think of. One was we did a remarkable achievement in reducing poverty amongst the aged in the late 1960s and early 70s. After President Johnson declared a war on poverty, we raised old age insurance benefits 5 times in the space of the next 7 years, between 65 and 72. And then basically we doubled the benefits. Then we indexed them. That was a program, an achievement that I used to say, you could write home to mother about that and be proud of that. We've not done that with children ever in our history. The closest we came, we also raised benefits for children in the 60s, but nothing like this. This would be remarkable.
And I think one of the things I get from your work is that it would be remarkable in the moment, but then remarkable for decades, generations thereafter. This conference is about social mobility, and reducing poverty is obviously part of that. But I'm curious what some of your research into the child allowance and the effects of getting that boost of income as a child on your later earnings in your later life, what that tells us about social mobility. Is this just a way to help people in the moment, or is this something that can help lift people out of poverty in the long term?
Oh, absolutely essential for the long term. So it has immediate effects. Definitely the poverty reduction is immediate, but these long-term benefits are all about social mobility. So if you've got better health and you have better education, you're going to earn more. Your life will be more secure. And if you go back to the first question you asked me about poverty, it's broader than poverty. If you look at the poverty tracker that we do with Robinhood, you can see that it's about only 1 in 5, only 1 in 5 children in New York City are poor. But if you look at the percent who experience material hardship, that is, they don't have enough money to go to the doctor, even though they need a doctor, or to afford food, or to afford their rent. 35% of children in New York City live in families that suffer from a hardship. And that's just the beginning. That's worse for Blacks than it is for whites, worse for Hispanics than it is for whites. But one of the beauties of the poverty tracker is that we follow people over time. And if you ask the question, what proportion of children are poor over 4-year period, you get up to 40%, double, 50%. It's half. It's half of children are poor one of the 4 years. And if you think about that, so if they're poor in one of the 4 years, and they could be poor in 2, or 3 or 4. But even if just pulling one, they're economically insecure. They're going in and out of poverty, but their life is insecure. And the child allowance would make a huge difference in reducing that economic security because it wouldn't disappear even if earnings fluctuate and you have uh, uh, face other things that threaten income. You get sick, you get unemployed, the child allowance would be there. And that would have been particularly, I digressed a little, but back to the pandemic, that would have been fundamental.
Talking about people getting sick and having temporary big hits. A lot of folks going through that last year.
Yes.
Your point about income fluctuations gets at something really important that I think is, I've sometimes found hard to explain to people, but is really key to this, which is refundability. That one of the things that makes what we're talking about a child allowance rather than just the child tax credit that many people watching this might claim on their taxes is that it's fully refundable. Can you talk a bit about what that means and why that's so important?
Yes. So the current child tax credit in the federal income tax doesn't go, the full credit doesn't go to the poorest third of children because they don't have enough income by which to apply against the credit. The poorest 10% get nothing, literally zero. So refundability is absolutely crucial. Senator Rubio has proposed just increasing the generosity of the credits. That would vitiate half the effect on poverty. Instead of reducing poverty 45%, it would still reduce poverty, but 20%, but cuts it in half. And the worst thing is it doesn't help the poorest children. Those are the people that are left out now, and they're disproportionately Black and brown. So I'm so glad you asked me that question.
Full refundability, it's very important. You mentioned a moment in the 60s when it felt like we were tackling child poverty. I guess to close, I just wanted to get a sense of how you view the year 2021 in the context of the history of our programs for children. Is this one of the more important years we've seen, one of the more hopeful years? What does it feel like in the context of that history to you?
Exciting. It's in a word. So if this happens, it will be like not quite as monumental, but it'll be akin to the Social Security Act. It will be the most important expansion of the Social Security Act in terms of cash benefits since its inception. Expanding Medicare, it will rank with that. We're so an incredible achievement.
It's an incredible moment, and I feel privileged to be living through it, and thankful to people like you who helped us get there. So thank you so much for this talk, Irv, and let's hope we get this year.
Thank you.